This video is about something we all want more of. I'm talking about money. All on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions. If you've got photo questions, you know what to do. You go to askdavidbergman.com, submit your question right there on the site. I just might pick it to answer here on a future show. Also, I'm back with my Shoot from the Pit live concert photography workshops. I've been doing them at arena concerts for a number of years now. I've got 3 very special ones coming up this year. We're going to be at stadiums. Yes, giant stadium concerts. I'm doing an advanced photo workshop there. You can get in only by submitting a portfolio. So go to shootfromthepit.com. You'll get all the information about getting your way into that Shoot from the Pit plus photo workshop. Appreciate that. Hope to see you out at a workshop sometime this year. All right, we've got a question today from Ward M, and Ward wants to know, I'm starting to earn a little money with photography, but I'm oblivious about what rates are common in the industry. What do you charge for concerts, sports, lifestyle, or weddings? Money. It's such a hot button topic, isn't it? Most people really don't like to talk about it. Photographers and really creative people of all types are notoriously bad about discussing money. But the reality is you need to make money to continue doing your art. If you have a hard time talking about money with your clients, then that's a problem you're going to need to get over. Now, I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but I do kind of understand why we might not want to discuss it with each other. When someone asks me how much I charge for a job, or really how much I make in a year, I don't really want to answer that question. I mean, how much do you make at your job? Right? We're kind of conditioned to not ask about such things because it can come across as rude or insensitive. But since photographers set their own rates, it really can be difficult for up-and-comers to know where to start. So this is why I'm here. I'm going to try and help you today. Now, first, as far as talking about money with clients, remember that every business runs on money. It's as simple as that. I get it that no one wants to be seen as the bad guy in their negotiations, but I don't believe that happens as often as you really think it does. Charging properly for your services actually makes clients respect you more. It really does. You don't have to be starving to be an artist. You are a professional, and this is what you charge. Remember, you're the seller. You're selling something, and they're buying. I've said this many times, both here and at my live workshops, but tell me one other service industry where the buyer sets the price. You call a plumber to fix your toilet, right? You can't tell them what you pay for plumbing. If you do, I promise they will not show up at your house. They tell you what it costs for their services, and you take it or leave it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can't negotiate sometimes, but of course, you need to know what your services are worth and not get taken advantage of. Also, remember that some clients simply can't afford you, and that's okay. They'll get someone less expensive, and you can move on to the bigger jobs. So, how do you know exactly what to charge? Well, contrary to popular opinion, there is no industry standard when it comes to creative work. There are as many different prices as there are photographers. And of course, it depends on which photographic specialty that you particularly are doing. But here are some things to think about when coming up with your own pricing. In most cases, the most important thing, the first thing to determine, is what we call your cost of doing business, your CODB. You might be surprised that it always does cost you money to walk out of the door to do a job, even if you don't literally take out your wallet or use Apple Pay with your phone or whatever we're doing today. There are some good CODB calculators online that are going to help you come up with this number. I'll link to a good one by the NPPA in the description down below, but they all pretty much work the same way. The idea is to input everything that you're paying or have paid for to be able to do your job. Now, I'm talking about your gear, of course, but it could also be your office or home office space. And then there are some other things that you might not always think about. The software that you use to cull and edit your images, web hosting, graphic design work, your car costs, right? Your regular maintenance and insurance for your car. If you have any professional fees, like if you join a photo industry group or two, maybe you have legal fees, maybe you have an attorney that you work with regularly, liability insurance for your business, and on and on and on. All of that stuff, you're going to enter that into the calculator. That then is going to be your overhead cost for the year. Then what you're going to do is enter in the number of days that you realistically think you can work. If you're a wedding photographer, you can probably only shoot on weekends, right? Because that's when weddings happen. That's 52 weeks a year. 2 days a week is 104 potential shooting days per year. But do you really think that you're going to shoot 2 days every weekend all year long? Probably not going to happen. And some parts of the year are slower seasons, and maybe, just maybe, you want to take some time off and, oh my God, go on vacation with your family or by yourself or just not do anything at all. You can totally deserve to take some time off. So maybe it's only, let's say, 50 shooting days a year that you can realistically shoot weddings. You've got to figure that out for yourself and, of course, estimate that as best you can. So let's say, for example, and I'm just totally making up these numbers. Let's say your overhead all totaled up to $30,000. You've got a lot of gear, you're a wedding photographer, you've got 30 grand in all of your overhead costs, and you figure that you can work 50 days a year. After you've entered all of that into the calculator, it's going to give you your cost of doing business. In this case, it's actually just going to give you your overhead costs. In this case, that's $600 per day. That is your break-even number, right? That is, you need to have an idea of what that number is, because if you charge that amount for each shoot of those 50 shoot days, then yes, you've covered your overhead cost, and that's great. But you haven't made a dime, right? You have not made a single dollar, right? You need to charge more than that number to actually start to make money. So this is when you want to add in your profit. How you figure out your profit is you really have to start backwards. How much do you want to make per year from your photography, right? It's up to you to make that decision. That amount is obviously going to be unique for each person. Someone who has a separate day job and is just doing photography on the side might be really happy making an extra $5,000 a year from their work. Someone else doing this full-time and living in a very expensive city like New York, and maybe you got a bunch of kids to support or whatever it is, might need to make $200,000 or more, right? $5,000 is not going to cut it. But whatever that number is for you, you're going to divide that up by the same number of days and then add it to your overhead expenses. Let's say it's $100,000 per year that you decide you want to make. Divide that by 50, and that's an extra $2,000 per day. You're going to add that into the $6,000 from before, and my made-up wedding photographer needs to charge $2,600 per wedding shoot day and do 50 weddings a year to make the money they want, right? Does that make sense? $2,600 in that case, right? That's profit and break even. Now, don't assume, now that you understand all of this, right, how this works, don't assume that a high-end wedding photographer who charges $15,000 per wedding is making all that much more profit than somebody charging $2,600. Their overhead is probably much, much higher. They likely have a studio where they see clients, and they might have people on staff doing things like editing, marketing, design, and a whole bunch of other jobs. That can get really expensive. And their cost of doing business is also going to be much higher. But I also do hope that they're making more profit as well, which they should be doing if their clients love them and their services are in demand. But that's up to them and how they structure their business. Now, like I said before, there are many types of photography, and I can't possibly go over how to price every single one of them. But one industry I do know a lot about is editorial and commercial work. Editorial is things like newspapers and magazines, websites, etc., right? Things like that. Commercial work is usually along the lines of advertising jobs. They're both priced with some of the same factors, but commercial work generally is going to garner a much higher rate than editorial work. You're never going to get $2,600 a day freelancing for a newspaper, but your cost of doing business should be lower because hopefully you work more than 50 days a year and might have less overhead as an editorial shooter. Let's say that person's overhead is $10,000, right? Maybe they want to make $50,000 in profit, and they can work $150 days a year for various editorial clients. That's $400 per shoot day, much closer to what you might be able to get from a magazine for an assignment like that. Now, knowing these numbers really helps you to also figure out what work you can do and when you can turn it down. If your cost of doing business is $400 and a newspaper calls you to do an assignment for $150, you're losing money on that job if you take it. It's coming right out of your profit. Now, you might think that some money is better than none, but I'd argue that by turning down jobs that are below your number threshold, you're better off spending that time marketing, promoting, networking, and doing all the things you need to do to get those better paying clients. I'd much rather spend 3 days to book a $2,000 job on day 4 than work 4 days at $150 each. Okay, so that's the foundation of pricing, and you know the minimum that you need to charge. But there are some other things that are going to affect your price as well, depending on the industry you're in, of course. I and most of my photographer friends charge for licensing. Remember, you don't sell pictures, you sell physical things like prints and books. But when an individual or a business wants to use your photo in some way for their website or on their social media or on the cover of their book or magazine, you issue them a license for that particular use. I actually did a video a bunch of years back about licensing. Maybe it's time for me to do another one of those, but you need to factor that license into your pricing because the more usage they want, the more it's going to cost them. And if you want to get an idea of what photographers typically charge for specific licenses, there's some great software out there. There's one called PhotoQuote. That's F-O-T-O, PhotoQuote. You can buy a standalone version of that, and it's worth every penny. Don't forget, of course, to add it into your cost of doing business. But you can also access PhotoQuote pricing if you have a PhotoShelter subscription. I use PhotoShelter to host my archive and my website, issue licenses, and deliver images to clients. Check the links below for all of that stuff. Now, lastly, don't forget to add in any expenses you might have for that particular shoot. Things like rental gear or rental car, other transportation costs. Maybe you have to hire assistants or makeup artists, prop stylists, whatever it is. That list could go on and on and on, and obviously depends on the shoot. But those are all costs that should be on top of your fees and licensing, right? A separate cost, so you don't have to, eat that cost, right? Unless you're building that into your fee, which you can do that after the fact. But if with most clients, you want to bill that out separately. Now, Ward asked me about specific rates for different industries. Now, as you know by now, there's kind of impossible to answer because it's going to be vastly different for everyone. Basic editorial coverage might be a couple $100, and there are advertising jobs that go well into six figures. One piece of advice I have, if you're working at the lower end of that scale, please make sure at least you're issuing a very limited license, right, for rights and not giving away the farm for that price. Also try to get your expenses like gas, parking, and meals paid for on top of that. If you've run your cost of doing business, you know that you're probably losing money working at that rate, unless you're just starting out and maybe living with your parents and don't have a lot of overhead. Now look, this business can absolutely be fun. You have to worry about the business part as well, and you really have to think about it. You need to make money, but of course it can be fun. Just act like a professional and your clients are going to respect you more than you thought. If you pay attention to your bottom line, run your numbers, and don't be afraid to charge appropriately for your work, you should be able to make yourself a decent career as a photographer. So good luck to all of you out there in doing that. Thanks, Ward, for the question. I really appreciate it. If you've got a photo question, just go over to askdavidbergman.com, submit it on the form right there on the site. The questions I like to answer are ones that I think are going to help as many people as possible. If you ask me something incredibly specific to your situation, it's not as useful to everyone else. So keep that in mind when you're filling out that form. Thanks again for joining me. I'm going to be back here next time with another question right here on Ask David Bergman.